In the name of God who creates and redeems and sustains us. Amen. One of the ways that you can tell that we're coming to the end of the church year, and next week is it, by the way, is when the readings in the Gospel start to get a little on the apocalyptic side. That can be a scary word, apocalypse. I think it's a scary word because everybody thinks they know what it means. And the funny part is, most people don't. I think thanks to the common understanding in the culture that we live in, courtesy of books and movies, fundamentalist preachers, it sounds like the end of the world. Or, as these preachers would have it, the end times. Well, ain't necessarily so. In biblical and theological terms, apocalypse only means the revealing of hidden things. The revealing of hidden things. That's it. The way our gospel writer today, Luke, uses it here has to do with the times he was living in, not the times that we are living in, or even necessarily so much the times Jesus was living in, but when Luke was alive, some 40 years after the events he describes in today's gospel reading. At the time that Luke was writing, there was a great rebellion going on in Judea, throughout Israel, against the Roman Empire. They were trying to throw the Romans out. And the Romans responded to that the way they always responded when people threatened to drive out the Romans. They sent in their legions, and they showed no mercy. They conquered the cities. They laid siege to Jerusalem. They got in. They killed a lot of people, destroyed a lot of buildings, and among them was the temple. So, the events that Luke has Jesus talking about were those very events. Since by Luke's time, Christians were already being considered a new faith, not just a stream of Judaism. They were being persecuted not just by Romans, but by Jews who felt they had strayed too far from Torah and were just too cozy with Gentiles. Jesus in Luke's gospel understands that the road ahead for his followers will be one of trials, travails, and he's warning them. The road won't be easy. It's not going to be easy to follow me in this culture. It's not that he's predicting the future as much as he's looking at the world as he sees it and is saying to his disciples, you've picked a tough path, but this is the way to salvation. Beware you are not led astray, he says. Many will come in my name and say, I am he, and the time is near. Do not go after them. Now, since those days, a good many people over the centuries have assumed they know the future, and only they know how people should respond to it. This has happened time and time again since Jesus. And each time there have been people who followed them. This can be disconcerting and is often been misused to talk about things that have nothing to do with what the writer was talking about. There's another thing. There's a nice reference here to signs and portents. Signs and portents. I think it's helpful to remember what the first century was like. In the ancient world, it was a pre-scientific world. There was no worldwide news. There was no way to know what was going on 20 miles away, let alone around the world. It was not necessarily easy to understand normal phenomena, like the arrival of a comet in the sky, or an eclipse of the sun or the moon, and uncommonly colored skies, because on the other side of the world, a volcano had erupted and spewed tons of ash in the atmosphere. Given the political situation at the edge of empires, word of an advancing army might not reach a place until they were encamped just outside. Uncertainty bred superstition. Even the Romans themselves did nothing. They didn't undertake a military campaign. They didn't make any major decisions until the auspices were consulted, and if they were favorable, they proceeded. This they determined by looking at the entrails, usually of a sacrificed bird. Luke wrote in that age. Jesus lived in that age. Whether they believed in signs or portents was completely beside the point. Signs were widely recognized, ways to determine what might happen. In troubling times, people would be looking for signs. This is all to say that for us, following Jesus is an ongoing journey into an unknown world. As long as we don't read too much into it, as long as we don't try to figure out what's exactly coming ahead, as long as we don't start predicting the future, we will find that being ready is quite sufficient. Remember Jesus' parable of the bridesmaids. There were 10 of them. They were to have their lamps ready, their wicks trimmed, extra flask of oil, but only 5 of them did that. The other 5 didn't bring the flask of oil, and when the bridegroom was delayed, they weren't ready to meet him. The 5 with the flask of oil were ready. That's it. They were ready. Having our lamps trimmed and our extra flask of oil ready is as ready as we need to be. That's all it is. We don't have to look for signs and portents. We don't have to read too much into things that might be happening in the future, because we can rest in the knowledge that we know that Jesus is with us. Luke was trying to help explain to his congregation why horrible things had happened when he included this passage. He was looking back to Jesus 40 years before as a way of explaining current events. People are again around us today looking and acting irrationally. They're suspending disbelief in all kinds of strange things. There's a segment of society that has gone anti-science and anti-modern medicine. Some of them may well be reading auspices before long, studying the entrails of dead birds to figure out whether things are okay or not. Meanwhile, we may not be arrested or brought before tribunals or killed for our faith here in Massachusetts in the year 2022. We may not fear naturally occurring phenomena in our skies, but no more than our first century forebears can we know the future. Trusting in Jesus and not getting lost in the world's distractions can help us to go far. And that can be important. As this church year winds to a close, and it will close next Sunday, it helps to keep that trust in mind. It helps to keep Jesus in our hearts and not worry so much about the details of what we may be down the road. That is all we need to worry about. That is the apocalyptic thing that Luke was talking about, not necessarily signs and portents or the end of the world in times, but knowing that and trusting that Jesus